This week's episode is sponsored by Pelican.
You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. My name is Alan Weitz.
And I'm Jill Waterman.
Charles Daniels is an unrequited hero of 60s rock and roll. Otherwise known as the Master Blaster or Two Nikon Charlie, he blazed the trail from the colorful streets of Harvard Square to the floodlit stages of top music venues like the legendary Boston Tea Party and beyond, snapping pictures all the way. There was only one small problem. See, Charlie never got around to processing most of the film that he shot. Minor detail. Thousands of rolls remained undeveloped and therefore unseen until his longtime partner, Susan Berstler, came up with a plan. After a GoFundMe campaign that was launched this past January, Charles' story went viral, building a huge fan base through both the international press and your favorite photography outlet. Since many listeners might already know the gist of this story, today we plan on taking a deeper dive for a more comprehensive update. During the first half of the show, we're going to chat with Charles and Susan, and then after a break, we'll speak with Film Rescue International's Gerald Freyer for news about the latest gems within Charles' unseen treasure trove and to learn about best practices for processing long, outdated film stock. So for anyone who might be in the dark about the Master Blaster and his cohorts, here's a quick overview of today's guests. Charles Daniels was born in segregated Alabama, where his parents ran a late-night speakeasy after farming cotton all day, which might explain how outlaw music got into his blood. After moving with his family to Boston's Roxbury neighborhood in the 1950s, he began teaching himself photography with a camera he found in his parents' closet. He began photographing whatever caught his eye on the city streets and in the era's legendary music venues. Soon he was serving as an emcee for the bands, which provided unique access and strong friendships. This led to Learjets and tours with the likes of Rod Stewart, Ron Wood, and the Rolling Stones. Since his start in rock and roll, Charles has expanded his photography to embrace a wide range of subjects, from music and fashion to dance, performance, and everything in between. Susan Berstler has a long history as a visual artist, curator, and arts producer, deeply immersed in the vibrant art scene of Somerville, Massachusetts. One of her primary interests is the transformative events in media, especially within public art. Her passion for this medium is further enhanced by her work as an emerging technology specialist for creative technologies at Harvard University's Cabot Science Library. After a small grant from the Somerville Arts Council allowed it to begin developing Charles' treasure trove of film, the GoFundMe campaign, set up by a friend, quickly went viral, raising more than $70,000 to date. Susan was referred to a company called Film Rescue International, which provided ideal solutions for film processing and creating high-resolution archival files from the negatives. At present, she's also in discussions with publishers and university archives to identify a final home for this unique image collection. Gerald Freyer is a technically trained photographer who also studied folklore, monument preservation, and cultural history at the University of Bamberg in Germany. After working as a research assistant in museums for several years, he became a consultant for digital imaging pioneer Phase One. Since 2007, Gerald has trained museum and archive staff in the use of high-end digitalization systems, completing both archival and 360-degree photography projects for international museums and cultural institutions. In 2021, he joined Film Rescue International to work on digitalization projects for its clients. Charles Daniels, Susan Berstler, and Gerald Freyer, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles, let's start with a question for you. According to Gerald, Film Rescue International has more than 4,000 rolls of your film to develop. That's the 35 millimeter and 120. Now, if you divide that by 55 years, that takes us back to 1967, and it averages about 70 rolls per year that are sitting there going back all that time. Now, to spin this calculation another way, is there any one year where most of these images were taken?
I would probably say 67, 68, probably up to 69.
That was a very, very exciting time because, first of all, rock and roll was very accessible. When you went to concerts back then, you were able to get a lot closer to the musicians. It wasn't as sequestered as it was. It just seemed everything was a lot more within reach. And then you were literally center stage for all of these things. How did that happen? How did you find yourself in the middle of all these amazing people who were on the verge of exploding onto, the worldwide stage?
Well, I was the announcer, and for some reason, all these people who came to town to play the Tea Party, we always sort of hung out together during the day, maybe walk around the streets and see what was going on in Cambridge and Boston, and just establish some kind of communication even before the musical events happened. It was just good to just hang out and check out what was going on.
So who gave you the microphone the first time? Whose idea was that?
I can't remember who exactly decided that someone should let the people know who the bands were. People knew who I was, so they thought that maybe you should just jump up there and give a quick shout out and let people know who was about to play. That was my initial intro into being the Master Blaster. All the international bands are starting to come to Boston to come to the Tea Party. And that changed everything. And I was just hanging out in the Tea Party, just one of the few people that was hanging out listening to the bands. Me and Peter used to hang out every day in Cambridge.
That's Peter Wolf, right? From the Jay Giles band.
That would be he.
How did you meet Peter?
I was hanging out in Harvard Square every day, and Peter lived in Harvard Square. And for some reason, we were close friends, even before he became the Wolf or Gopher from Jay Giles in those bands. I mean, he played in a little local band called the Hallucinations, and that was before he became a serious rocker. And that was during the early days of BCN too, when he was the night disc jockey from midnight to 6 in the morning. Him and BCN sort of came to life as a rock station. And we were sort of like partners on the radio. We actually were partners in everyday life, and it was just sort of natural to hang out on the radio together. And then when he had a gig, had to go play somewhere, then I would try and hold the radio show down while he was away.
So who gave each other the nickname first, Master Blaster or Woofa Goofa?
He probably started calling me the Master Blaster, and then I started calling him the Woofa Goofa.
Where did you get that?
It would just seem like it was a fitting description of him at the time, and what I was doing was introducing the bands on stage. So I guess I was the Master Blaster in terms of letting people know who the bands were about to play at the Tea Party.
One of the things that's interesting about your photographs, looking at the ones that we were able to see so far, is that aside from the fact that you have some really good shots taken during performances of all of these groups, almost in your face pictures, a lot of them. What you do have that many and most other musical photographers don't have is an extremely at ease position with each of these performers backstage and not when they're performing, that you don't usually see, even if a lot of the higher profile photographers, and we've had some good musical photographers on the show in the past, even the stuff they have that's backstage and stuff like that, there's a certain amount of posturing and posing going on because these people are performers. But in an awful lot of the photographs that I've seen of yours so far, they're not even aware of you. You really are wallpaper there. And they're just being themselves. And you're catching these people in a way that we're normally not seeing them.
Well, to me, that was what was starting to happen. Like everyone knew what the bands looked like when they were playing on stage and stuff. And I actually had the opportunity during the day to hang out with some of these bands, and we would sort of cruise around the city, get out on the streets and kind of walk around, see what was happening in Boston as opposed to where they were coming from. And so it became really kind of continuous that when the bands came to town, that we would sort of hang out and and walk around and give them a little bit more information about sort of what was happening outside of just what was happening on stage with them.
Out of all the musicians that you have photographed, who was the most enjoyable to photograph? Who interplayed with you the most and gave you the best photographs?
Are you talking international or local?
Anybody.
Probably, obviously with Peter during the old days. I mean, he was in a couple different bands before he became the Wolf of Gopher and I became the Master Blaster. But a lot of the bands that were starting to come over from England, bands like Humble Pie, Bad Company, and Alvin Lee from 10 Years After. He was like one of my good friends, and we actually hung out together a lot. And he was probably the first person that I actually spent a lot of time with. We would always get out on the streets. I'd go over to the hotel, pick him up, and we would just cruise Cambridge or cruise around Back Bay, around Newbury Street, and go and hang out in the Commons. And that was even during the early days of BCN. And I can remember one time Alvin was playing the Tea Party. Alvin was also someone who shot photographs. So we were almost like co-photographer mates. And one time he was sitting in the public gardens playing his trademark red guitar. And we were supposed to go up to BCN to do like an interview. And so we started walking from the public gardens. And he was plugged in, and so for some reason he started walking along playing his guitar, and he had like a little amplifier called a pig nose, and I was holding the amplifier, and we were walking up Newbury Street towards the Prudential, and people were just like totally freaking out that, oh wow, that's Alvin Lee from 10 Years After, the Master Blasters, and we just walked to the Prudential. And he never stopped playing the guitar, and we ended up going up to the right floor that BCN was on at the time and just walked into the studio, and he never stopped playing. And then the DJ said, wow, and Alvin Lee just walked in playing his guitar along with the Master Blasters. So things were totally different in those days. A lot of the bands who came to play at the Tea Party, they loved the idea of being able to get out on the streets and hang out and to check out the scene here. This was the first time that they were coming into the States. So it was really interesting to see what was happening before they would play that evening at the Tea Party.
And you were their ambassador. You introduced them to America. That's pretty cool. Having shot concerts back in the 60s, it was not easy. It's a lot easier today with digital imaging and sensors that you can crank the ISO settings up to like nosebleed numbers. You were shooting film back then, and you were shooting predominantly Nikons. You were 2 Nikon Charlie, so you're not using a Pentax.
Yeah, that was my nickname, two Nikon Charlie, and I only shot black and white. I mean, I probably went like 12, 15, maybe 20 years without shooting a roll of color film. I was hardcore black and white.
Wow. Now, when you were shooting concerts, I mean, the light levels are low. How far would you push the Tri-X? It's 400 normally, but how far up did you push it to get images?
Well, in those days, pushing film was just starting to come into its own. So I started out probably at 16, but ideally you needed to go a little bit faster into 24 or 3200 before it became really, really, really good stuff than being able to record what was happening on stage totally. So.
And at that point, you could actually see the grain on the negative just holding it up to light.
Yeah, I mean, no one was pushing film that far in those days. So you were like cutting edge, but the fact that you sort of had a little stage lighting that sort of helped it out, but it gave people a better image of what was happening on stage when you pushed it up a little bit more than just the regular, 400 to 16 or 3200.
Did you use a spot meter, or did you just, is this just from experience, you just know where you had to be?
I always had some kind of little meter or something, a hand meter. Most people only had the meter in a camera, whereas I actually had some pretty good hand meters. I shot mostly Nikons and Leicas in those days, so I think that they accepted working in low light a little bit better than some of the other. I mean, they were pretty hardcore, really professional cameras back in those days.
Oh, yeah. You could. I was joking about the original Nikon F. You could use it as a hammer. You could bang nails on the wall and then go shoot a job with. Same thing with Leicas. I mean, they're just built like bricks. What kind of lenses did you rely on? What were your key lenses?
I had a Leica that had a 21 millimeter, and that lens never really came off the camera.
I know what you mean.
It was wide angle was a lot more interesting back in those days, and no one was shooting wide angle. That was the first introduction to anything outside of a 50, and most people were just using a 50. So the fact that I was using wide angle gave it a completely different look than what most people were getting in those days.
Charles, you talked about pushing the film, but since you didn't develop most of your film, did you at least write down the ISO that you were shooting at?
It's funny. I never really.
There is laughing going on back there. You could hear it.
I'm thinking that's really a question for Gerald, but
I never really wrote down anything. I just automatically, if I shot anything inside, it was automatically either 24 or 3200. That was the formula that seemed to work out best.
I'm going to jump in here just a second. One of the things that's amazing about all the film that Gerald's been developing is the last time we talked about it, and he had done all of the black and white, which was a couple thousand, and he said that there was only 20 or 30 rolls that came out blank, which when you consider how much Charles was pushing film and not labeling what he had pushed it to, it's kind of amazing that he's gotten that low of a failure rate.
You know, that's sort of like going shopping for canned goods and then taking all the labels off the cans before you put them away in the cabinet. It's not.
You know, at one point, I think that you just automatically reached a number that seemed to work for shooting inside. You know, once you had a lab that was willing to develop your stuff, I sort of ended up around 2400 or 3200, which gave me the best images. So. And that's where it's been ever since, even up until this day. I mean, those are my numbers that I work from for shooting indoor black and white film. Although in those days I never shot color. For some reason I wasn't into color at all.
Color film wasn't fast either.
No.
I mean, the fastest color film for the longest time was, I think, 800, and that was a miserable film. It was horrible. And then I know that I think it was Ansco or Agfa had a 1600 speed slide film that was it was like watercolor paint. It was like splattered paint. It was interesting to look at, but I mean, it was kind of limited to what you can do. And also, you didn't have the exposure range of black and white. Black and white, you could be off by a stop at 2, and you could still have a salvageable image. Color just didn't give you that kind of latitude. You really had to nail it.
No, that's why in those days I pretty much shot black and white. Also, I found black and white to be more interesting looking. So I basically just shot black and white, juiced it up a little bit, and that's where it's been since then up until now.
It's timeless.
Totally.
I've got a question for you, Charles. When you were up on stage being the MC and walking around with a microphone in one hand and a camera in the other?
Pretty much close to that. As soon as I introduced in the group, then I was right there shooting, and I had the advantage of being able to be as close to the group as I was, where a lot of people just didn't have that advantage. So it's funny because for the longest time, groups would play, and I didn't really pay as much of attention to it. And then one day it was like a light bulb went off in my head that said, wow, you certainly do have an advantage. Not only was I interested on shooting what they were doing when they were playing, I was sort of interested in what they were doing when they weren't always on stage. I found that to be kind of interesting. If I had a chance to hang out with the group that was playing the Tea Party during the day, we walked around the city, hung out in different places.
And backstage as well?
Yeah. I was interested in what was happening off stage as what was happening when they played.
So one of the earlier roles of film that got developed was a very typical role for Charles, which was a roll of 36 images. And it started out with some shots of his girlfriend at the time in their apartment. And then it kind of went to some pictures on the subway. And then you could see him walking through the public garden. There were some shots. And I think he was on his way to the Boston Garden to announce the Who, because suddenly there were these pictures, just 3 or 4 of them, but there was Pete Townsend and Keith Moon backstage hanging out. But, Charles ended up meeting and becoming friends with Rod Stewart, and he worked for the Faces, touring as their MC for about 3 years. And one of the funnier tidbits I like about that period of his life was the fact that the Faces were banned from so many hotels that they used to check in as Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, my God.
That became popular for bands to wreck their hotel rooms after they had played somewhere.
So let's shift to Susan for a minute. We know that Charles didn't develop his film, and it ended up lying around your house for years. How long did it take you to find everything once you decided that it needed to be developed?
The one good thing that's come out of COVID was this project, because we were both home. I was working at home for almost 2 years, and we finally had time to sort of focus on, our environment a little bit more. But to answer Jill's question, we're still finding film. I found 2 rolls yesterday. So,
what's weird is once I shot it, it's almost like I didn't really need to see it as long as I had it. For years, I never really developed any film, but I was shooting all the time. It was just there. And then at some point, I realized that I needed to bring some of this older stuff to life. And I've been sitting on this stuff for years.
Well, one question I do have is that I noticed in notes that you do have some color film that still has to be developed, and some of that might be Kodachrome. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's both 35 millimeter and some 120 Kodachrome that's going to be developed as black and white. Gerald can talk about the numbers, but he did a few test rolls just to make sure it was going to work.
So, Susan, let's talk about your GoFundMe campaign, which shot to success. I imagine you were barraged with emails and inquiries. How did you keep track of all the incoming interest?
Not well, probably is the short answer. It's hard. Charles was diagnosed with MDS, which is a type of blood cancer, last fall, and started chemo on his birthday, which was November 30th, a year ago. And the GoFundMe was started by a really dear friend of mine, Cecily Miller, who thought that people would be interested in it. At that point, I was so busy trying to deal with what was going on with Charles, and the house we had been living in for 35 years was up for sale. There was just a lot going on in life, and I never would have done the GoFundMe if she hadn't taken the initiative and started it. And so once she started the GoFundMe, it's kind of crazy, the comments and the people who've known Charles, or they met him when he was working with horses. So like all these people that he hadn't talked to in 40 or 50 years sort of started coming out of the woodwork. And then he also got a lot of inquiries. People are interested in trying to maybe do a documentary on him, or, there's been a couple publishers who were interested. It was overwhelming, to be honest with you. When the GoFundMe came out, there was a reporter from the Boston Globe who did an interview with Charles. He put it on the front page of the Globe, which we never expected. It was just sort of a landslide after that. But I think the most important part for us has really been concentrating on his health in the photos themselves. Gerald will tell you his part of it, but, we're very grateful for all the work that Film Rescue's put into it, and the fact that they've been able to get images. That's the other thing online. A lot of people were like, the film will never work if it's 50 years old. Well, some of it's a little spotty, some of it's a little grainy, some of it's underexposed, but some of it looks like it was shot last week.
Amazing. So how did you connect with Film Rescue International?
So during COVID, our local arts council, who both of us have done a lot of work in, we live in Somerville, which is just outside of Boston, and it's known for sort of its arts community. And the local arts council had these grants to try to help out local artists, especially BIPOC artists. And I said, well, why don't we apply for one and just develop some film? And so we did that. He got a few $1,000s, and we worked with a local lab. And that's when we started actually looking for the film, too, to figure out how much there was. And we were happy with the black and white and not so happy with the E6 or the C41. So I started looking around for somebody else who might be able to take on this project. And, I know a lot of photographers, and just put the word out, and a couple people came back and kept saying film rescue. And so I reached out and I got a hold of them, and it's where it all started.
Mm.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we come back. We're going to pivot to a chat with Gerald Freyer of Film Rescue International to learn about how his company processes long outdated film and digitizes the resulting negatives with a Phase 1 cultural heritage digital setup. So stay tuned.
If you're a photographer or videographer on the go, make sure you check out the Pelican Air Case series. Pelican Air cases are ultra lightweight, durable, and perfect for all your photography, videography, and consumer entertainment needs. Head on over to bnh.com to find the perfect Pelican Air case for all your gear.
Okay, we are back, and we are joined with Gerald Freyer of Film Rescue International. And again, this is a big part of the process where Gerald's company takes film that is way out of date and performs magic and brings it back and enables us to see pictures that were taken, in this case, decades ago. So, Gerald, what's the backstory of Film Rescue International? Can you give us a quick overview of how you guys came to be?
Oh, yeah, sure. So Film Rescue has started its business in the 1983 in Toronto. And it was founded by Greg Miller, and he moved to Saskatchewan in 1999. He was always interested in processing movie film, and then in the 90s, he started to process lost and found film, and that small business started. And when he moved to Saskatchewan, he was focused on lost and found film, and we have a lot of experience in processing old film. So I think the oldest one we ever processed was from 1908 or 1910. So we got lots of stuff from the early 20s, 30s, and 40s. But most of the stuff we are processing today is from maybe the 50s and the 60s.
So in the case of black and white, my understanding is as film gets older, essentially it builds up gray density more. You don't get cleaner highlights or clear areas in the film itself, and you lose contrast. What else happens with time? And again, this is all depending on temperature, humidity. There's a whole lot of environmental things. I mean, if you freeze film that hasn't, and keep it frozen for decades, it could yield better results than a roll of film that's been sitting in a garage or an attic.
Yes, that's true. For instance, if you find a roll of film on a glacier that was on the glacier for 50, 60, 70 years, you will get pretty good image out of that. That's the same thing if you put it in a freezer for years, that's okay. But if you have it in a really bad environment, like something from a jungle area, we had that before, you can be sure that after 5, 6, 7 years, you will have lots of problems to get a good image on that. But that's the thing we're doing with Film Rescue. We always focus on the image. That's why we try to process a black and white image first to save the image. And in the second step, we're going to accelerate the color. So if we have a color film, that gives us the opportunity to process color. But mostly we got black and white stuff. And if we got Kodachrome, and that's the sad thing, there's no chance to get any kind of color out of this film.
But you can get black and white out of
yes.
it. Is that correct? Or
That's
is that
correct. Yeah, we can.
Okay, interesting.
We can get really good black and white images out of Kodachrome. Just from Charles' rolls, there was one roll I remember. There was a Kodachrome, and that looked really good. We also had some Kodachrome 120, and that turned out really good. Yeah. So at the end, it's a black and white process, and it gives us a quite good quality of black and white images.
A lot of people don't know that Kodachrome itself, even though it's celebrated as an amazing color transparency film, was actually a black and white film where the color was added during processing. And that's one of the reasons why it was so consistently good, and the grain itself was tighter, because it was easier to design the film as a black and white rather than a color film with all of this in it as it went out the door.
Yes, that's right. That's why we have the chance to still process black and white images out of these Kodachrome rolls. Yeah.
See, I didn't even know we had the ability to go that far, and I thought it was just a dead process. That's kind of interesting. So when you get film in, say from Charles or anybody for that matter, where you say we shot it years ago, we don't know anything about it, what is the first thing you do? I imagine you take a certain length of the film and you just do a basic, I guess it would be called a clip test on it to see what's there and how it might have to be adjusted in development?
Not in general. No, we don't have to do that because we're processing thousands of rolls, and we have a long time experience in developing lost and found film. So we have a kind of database, and so we know how to deal with these films. But when we know, okay, this is a film maybe from the late 1990s, a color film, so we can go directly to color. We have some experience in that, so we are not dealing with a standard color or slide process. So this is our own recipe, our own experience we use for processing. We don't cut the film, so we just process in one roll.
And does that even hold true for like in Charles' case? He has many rolls of film where he pushed the ISO and he didn't necessarily mark the film that he did that.
Yeah, so maybe pushing the film was a good idea maybe in the 1960s or 70s, but to process a pushed film today, that could be quite a problem, because over all these decades we lost a lot of sensitivity in that rolls. So there was no chance for processing a pushed film. So we have to try to do the best after with the digitizing system later.
I just want to say that a lot of the old color film I kept in the fridge. I didn't develop it for years. It just hung out in the fridge. So
okay.
Actually, it really, there wasn't a real problem with developing some of the old film because it had been kept in the refrigerator. And so it hadn't faded like it would have if you hadn't have kept it frozen.
Yeah.
Good move. Now, you mentioned something that I did not know, and that is you alluded to the fact that with time, you lose detail on film that has been pushed a little bit, so I imagine it holds it even for film that has been pushed, that with time, do you lose certain amount of detail of the image?
No. As Susan mentioned, so sometimes we will have rolls, they are just looking sharp and clear as it was just shot yesterday. We don't lose any kind of details, but sometimes we will see some foggy areas. So when the picture was shot sharp and it was in focus, we can be sure that we can have a really good image out of that when it's stored properly.
So I'm curious about the chemistry that you use for developing film. Is it similar to commercially available developers, or is it totally different?
So this is a part of our experience. In general, I can say no, it's not a standard process.
I figured.
But all the other stuff is this is our...
Oh, that's your secret.
Our secret.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this is a long experience that Film Rescue has with these type of films. So, and that's why we are not processing new film or newer film with a standard chemistry. No, we are just using our own recipe for dealing with these kind of films.
And you mentioned that the company started working with movie film, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right, and we're still doing this. So we're running a black and white process, and we're running a high-end laser graphic film scanner for 60 millimeter film and movie film. So this is another part of our job that we are processing and scanning movie film. And there's a lot of Kodachrome Super 8 out there, and it's still coming nearly every day. So, and we're trying to do work with that too. So we got a really nice Super 8 black and white film out of that Kodachrome stuff.
This is for Gerald. Just one question. Do you find that there's differences, say, between expired Kodak film and, say, Ilford or Agfa films or any of the other ones? Are there certain films that you prefer working with and some that when they show up you go, uh-oh?
Honestly, sometimes if you have the same film, maybe for instance a Kodak Ektachrome from the 70s or from the 80s or from the 90s, sometimes they're really good. Sometimes you can have really bad quality. So it's so hard to say, but I think mostly all the black and white film, they will survive really good over the decades. A lot of color films, they are fading out, and we are happy to have a really nice black and white film, and that gives us a better quality.
That's interesting to hear. I know that, again, Kodachromes hold up. I mean, I've seen Kodachromes from World War II, from the earliest Kodachrome films, when I think they're ASA 3 or 10, but the colors are still brilliant.
Yeah.
But I could also be looking at E6, meaning Ektachrome, Fujichrome, any color film that ends in the word chrome, an E6 process, and they do start fading after 15, 20 years. And some of my older ones, unless they've been kept in really cool, dark, dry places, as soon as you look at them, you know that that's not what I shot back then. It's fading, it's shifting, and everything else. And so I guess that means that I think good advice for anybody who's listening, if you do have transparencies from back in the day, you should take a look at them, and you should perhaps think about scanning them to maintain the color integrity that they have, because in time they are going to fade and they are going to become unusable, and probably sooner than we expect.
Yes, that's right. For a lot of archives, that's the big challenge now, because we have to save the image. And that's what we're doing at Film Rescue. We're trying to save the image, and then we're focused on the color in the next step. But with all these high-end digitization systems like we were using at Film Rescue, we can get a really good image out of that, because in the second step we can do the editing, and that looks really, really good sometimes. So the editing is really important in that. So one part is saving the image, and the next step is getting the best quality, because we're using the high-end scanning system for this.
Yeah, I think something that's worth mentioning is that a lot of people are under the impression that when you copy an image, you're losing. And quite often that's true. A copy of an original is seldom as good as the original. But one of the things that I found with scanning is that when you're scanning, especially if you're doing raw files, which is really what you should be doing, I have found that with the Kodachromes and many of the Ektachromes and Fujichromes that I've been scanning and bringing back to life, I'm getting actually more detail in my highlights and shadows than I ever saw before when I would take the slide and send it out to have a print made or a conversion or something like that, because with digital, it seems to see very far into the image. And in many cases, the image that I'm getting after scanning it is in many ways better than the original. I may not be able to capture the color of Kodachrome, especially some of those twilight skies. You just can't match that with ink or on a screen. It just doesn't happen. But the detail, and especially shadows of Kodachromes, which you tend to just go black, they have life in them. And highlights, they have life in them. And I think that's something that's worth looking into for anybody who has older photographs. You're not going to come up with an image that's worse than the original or depleted in any way from detail. In many cases, if you're doing it right, you actually come up with a better image than you might have originally captured.
No, that's right. It's because of all these digital cameras. It doesn't matter if you're using a DSLR or a high-end digital back. The paper you used for copying, like AL4 paper, comparing to a digital back, the range from shadow to highlight is way smaller in that paper than in any kind of digital cameras or digital backs. Yeah, and that's why you have all these details. They are still in the slide. And when you do the scanning, you will have that in your digital file, yes.
Gerald, I'm curious about the workflow and the relationship between the film development and the scanning part. How much time is dedicated to the scanning and after development versus the initial development?
Just to give you an idea, so at the moment, I think we process around 2,600 rolls, and we digitize 1,850 rolls. So,
oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gerald.
I have a vague idea what that encompasses. That's a lot of work. Oh my God.
Yeah, so I just did a backup on our LTO drive last night, and we're around 7 terabyte of data now.
Charles is shaking his head over here.
And this is just the raw file, because the JPEG are really small we are using for our online gallery.
Yeah, thank God for little things.
So we have a 100 megapixel raw file of each image, and we are talking about roughly 60,000 images. So that gives us a lot of data here.
Wow.
Oh my God. So you've been driving back and forth between Saskatchewan and Somerville. Do you do any of the work along the way? Because that's a lot of downtime. I imagine you should process and scan as you're driving. You could save a lot of time. No?
Honestly, so there were two reasons. So first of all, there was a chance for us to speed things up. So we had all the rolls in one shipping, and it was safer to do this like I did. And I combined it with a road trip I always want. I'm originally from Europe, and driving over the North American continent, that was quite an amazing thing for me. So driving was quite a challenge for me too. And I combined it with some other meetings I had on the East Coast. So it was not just the tour for Charles.
Yeah, because you can make a lot better time with a plane. You really can. Now I get it. Okay, now it sounds fine.
Yeah, so,
all right.
Traveling with a plane, that was not an option. So I think it was 6 moving boxes on the back of my truck. And when I crossed the border from Toronto to the States, and the people at the border, they get suspicious. Why are you having 6 or 7 empty moving boxes on the back of your truck? I had to explain the border people, okay, I'm going there, I'm picking up some film. And they were really suspicious why a guy with the German passport and the Saskatchewan license plate came up with empty boxes to pick up some film.
Why? What can go wrong? Come on. It's just routine.
So are there any consequences with customs for bringing the film back and forth over the border?
No. Traveling with film, just crossing the border, it's not a big thing. No, you can do that.
And it's a lot safer than flying with X-rays.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Right.
And that's why we did that. Because when we're using UPS or any kind of other shipping companies, you have no idea how they treat this film. Maybe they use X-ray. We have no idea about that. That's why it was a good idea to do this.
Yeah, no choice. And also, again, from my understanding is that any film that's X-rayed is taking a hit to some degree, especially if it's a higher ISO film. The higher, the more sensitive the film is, the harder hit it's going to take from X-rays, even though low dosage. And if I'm not mistaken, long out-of-date film that's already in a decline will take a further hit, and also the film is already fogging, so you're just adding a lot more to your headaches as far as trying to pull a good image out of that. So I guess in this case, it was the smartest thing to do was to drive.
Yes, that's true, and it was an adventure. I did that trip in 7 days, and that was that was a cool thing. Yeah,
7 days. Oh my, wow. Okay.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. I want to say one of the things that was nice about it was we actually got to meet Gerald. One of the reasons Charles has had such a backlog of film is he's very cautious about who he lets work with his work. And it was really nice to meet Gerald and know that he was the person who was actually going to be handling it. And I know we both felt better about the project after that. So
makes a lot of sense. Sure, I get that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because this is as personal as it gets. I mean, this is your life that you're talking about, and you're turning it over to a stranger, essentially.
Yeah, and even for me, it was a big thing because I met him personally, and I'm really thankful that I had the chance to do that, because this is now my life. This is nearly my full-time job, dealing with Charles' work, and it looks like it will be another at least 2 months' work just on these roles, and I have to return them to Boston. Yeah.
So you've also taken on the passion of the work. It's not just another client's project. There's a passion involved in this, which makes it that much more special.
Oh, I'm pretty sure everybody who has the chance to deal with all these older and vintage photography, this is more than just a job. It's definitely a passion thing. Yeah.
It's a great project. I tell you, we look forward to seeing the results of all this, and hopefully there's going to be one hell of a book coming down the pike in not too distant future. That's what we'd love to see. And it'd be great to have all of you back when that book is out to talk about the book and how all of this worked out.
Yeah. Gerald, I'm curious, is there any one picture that really blew your mind in the process of developing everything?
I really like one picture with Joe Cocker backstage, and I think he's eating a chicken or a sandwich or something. Maybe Susan, you remember that picture?
I'm not sure what he was eating though.
Yeah, but he was chewing on something. But that's definitely for me one of the a great picture. So because it's so private.
So, Susan and Charles, aside from getting this project wrapped up, and again, I'm just projecting hopefully into a book form or something like that, do you guys have any other projects coming along, or is it all going to be around this project and getting Charles' health back online?
I mean, this project's been overwhelming and continues to be overwhelming. We are talking to a publisher about possible book. We were sort of doing it in a hurry and then decided to slow down and wait till we actually see all of the images first. It didn't make sense to move ahead before Gerald had even finished developing what he had. And there's been a number of people who are very interested in Charles's story, like from a documentary point of view. And when they first reached out about that, we weren't at all interested because he wasn't doing very well. And now he's in a better place and he's feeling healthier. And so we're sort of thinking about what that might look like, because as cool as his photos are, and the photos are pretty amazing, his stories are even more. So it's nice to listen to him talk about what was happening with when he took the photographs.
Oh, yeah, I imagine it is because, again, the stories have got to be wonderful to go along with this. And again, the pictures, they're super. I mean, I've seen slews of pictures from that era. These are special. These are different. These are personal. These are kind of really, they're intimate and they're lovely. They really are.
Yeah. I mean, one of the roles that came back that I liked the most was of the Jeff Beck group. So somebody probably could tell you what year that was, 1966 or 67 or something. But for some reason, Charles was in the limo that drove to the airport to pick them up. And back then, cars were allowed on the tarmac. So there's this limo parked on the tarmac. There's this person in a uniform who was the limousine driver. And then there's these 3 businessmen in suits with their little briefcases that people used to have with ties and jackets. And then there's, I think, Rod Stewart, Jeff Beck, and maybe Ron Wood, but dressed like rock and rollers. And it's just such an odd picture. And it's very wide angle, right? So there's a lot in that picture. There's a limo, there's the plane, you're on the tarmac. It's just curious on so many different levels, and that's what I like about the pictures, is that they kind of surprise me every time I look at them.
It's a time that ain't coming back.
Yeah.
And it's great to know that this stuff has been recorded. It's really, really good to know that. And Gerald, what about yourself? I know you've got your work cut out for you, at least it looks like through Christmas, getting all of this finished up and scanned. Any other projects that you're working on that you'd like to mention?
That's a good question. So because this is our dealing with all these kind of lost and found film. This is our daily life. So maybe tomorrow there will be an email from somebody wherever and said, okay, I will have another interesting project. Yeah. And this is what happens to film rescue all the time. And that's why I choose moving from Europe to Canada to work for Film Rescue, because it's an amazing company that gives us really every day something new. And there are maybe hundreds or thousands of roles and thousands of stories to discover. This is our work, and that makes it so interesting and amazing.
I also think it's kind of a brilliant idea to have this operation in Saskatchewan. You don't have to refrigerate anything. You just leave it on your windowsill.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here. Yeah, that's right.
And if people want to catch up on websites or anything like that for your organization, where can they go to?
Yes, we have a website. It's www.filmrescue.com. When people need some help, we're also on Facebook. And we're talking about lost and found film, and we're talking about movie and photography film and how we process this. And we're talking about our color and our digitization systems. And yeah, that's what we're doing on our website.
And that address will be in our show notes. And Susan and Charles, if our listeners want to catch up and see what exists so far from Charles' work, where can they go to?
Well, I've been posting a few images as they get developed on the GoFundMe as updates, and that's probably the best place to see the updates.
Okay, and we're going to have all that information again in the show notes if any of our listeners want to catch up. And I strongly suggest you do. There's some great imagery in there, some terrific stuff. This has been an interesting show, and what's fun is that it's still a work in progress, which means that we're going to have to keep tabs on you guys to find out how things are coming along. And as I said, I'm hoping that in due time we're going to have a follow-up show to talk about one hell of a book.
Definitely.
Well, I hope so. Thank you both for inviting us. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Absolutely our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having Film Rescue on that too.
I thank you very much for taking an interest in what I've done over the years. It's been my life, and I'm still doing it.
Yeah. Charles, you're amazing.
Well, what's really cool is that you're still here, and you're going to see people recognizing everything that you've been doing for your life, and it's nice to get recognized for that. It's been a lot of fun. It really, really has been.
I thank you.
Take care.
If you're a fan of the show but you're not yet a subscriber, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast and click subscribe. You can also find us on the Explorer blog, where we post photos from our guests and show notes. And please join us on Facebook and the B&H Photography Podcast group, where you can share your favorite photos and comments about the show. My name is Alan Weitz, and on behalf of Jill Waterman and our new audio engineer, Mike Weinstein, thank you oh so much for tuning in today.
Thanks to Pelican for sponsoring this week's episode.